Hello, and welcome to Mythos and Logos. Here's something that shouldn't exist. A text that shaped Western mysticism for 2,000 years, influenced Isaac Newton's understanding of the universe, and provided the foundation for centuries of alchemical practice. A text carved on an emerald tablet by the god of wisdom himself, discovered in a cave beneath a statue, clutched in the mummified hands of Hermes Trismegistus. A text that transformed medieval science, Renaissance philosophy, and modern psychology. And yet, no one has ever seen the original. No museum holds it, no archive preserves it. The Emerald Tablet, perhaps the most influential document that may never have physically existed, has shaped human thought through pure idea alone, transmitted through whispers, translations of translations, and the dreams of mystics. Tonight, we will journey through the verdant mystery of the Emerald Tablets, following their shadowy path from the temples of ancient Egypt, through the libraries of Baghdad, from the secret laboratories of medieval alchemists, to the hidden studies of history's greatest scientists. We will explore how 13 cryptic lines of text, beginning with the famous axiom, "as above, so below," became the cornerstone of hermetic philosophy and the template for understanding the hidden connections that bind the universe together. We'll discover why scholars still debate whether the tablets ever existed in physical form, and perhaps more importantly, why it might not matter. May I ask for your help? Liking and subscribing takes just a moment, but makes a huge difference for the channel. I'm grateful for your consideration. I'm also always amazed by our international reach, so I'd appreciate hearing where you're joining from and your local time. As the present fades to whispers, we find ourselves transported to the sacred silence of ancient Egypt, where hieroglyphs dance on temple walls, and the boundary between divine wisdom and human knowledge dissolves in clouds of incense. Here, in the shadows of pyramids that pierce the desert sky, where the Nile's waters carry both life and mystery, our story begins. Whispers from the House of Life. You stand at the threshold of the Per-Ankh, the House of Life, as the first light of dawn paints the limestone walls in shades of gold and rose. The air is thick with myrrh and kefi incense, that sacred blend of 16 ingredients that the priests say opens doorways between worlds. Your bare feet feel the coolness of the stone floor, polished smooth by countless generations of scribes who have walked these halls before you. As you move deeper into the temple complex, the sounds of the waking city fade behind you. Here, in these sacred chambers, time moves differently. The walls around you are alive with wisdom, covered floor to ceiling with hieroglyphic texts that contain the accumulated knowledge of 3,000 years. You can smell the papyrus, that green scent of river reeds, mixed with the sharp tang of ink made from carbon and gum arabic. Your fingers trace the carved symbols on the wall, feeling the depth of each carefully chiseled line. This is where medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and magic are one science, where the movements of stars are recorded alongside the recipes for healing salves, where the names of demons are catalogued with the same precision as the flooding patterns of the Nile. In the innermost sanctuary, accessible only to the highest initiates, you find yourself before a shrine of polished black granite. The surface reflects your face, distorted and mysterious in the flickering oil lamplight. Here, the senior priests whisper, are kept the books of Thoth himself, written by the god's own hand in the first age of the world. Books that contain the words of creation, the true names of all things, the keys to transformation. But these books, they say, are not meant for mortal eyes. To read them unprepared is to risk madness or death. So the wisdom is filtered, translated, hidden in symbols and allegories, waiting for those with eyes to see. You feel the weight of secrecy, the burden of knowledge that cannot be spoken aloud. This is the tradition you are inheriting, the golden chain of wisdom that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward to ages yet unborn. Thoth's sacred stylus. In the mythology of ancient Egypt, Thoth stood apart from the other gods. While Ra commanded the sun and Osiris ruled the underworld, Thoth governed something more subtle yet equally powerful: knowledge itself. The Egyptians called him Jehuti, and depicted him with the head of an ibis, that patient bird that stands motionless in the Nile shallows, watching and waiting with perfect stillness until the moment of truth arrives. Picture him in the great hall of judgment, where the hearts of the dead are weighed against the feather of truth. Thoth stands to the side with his palette and stylus, recording the outcome with absolute precision. He is the scribe of the gods, the keeper of divine archives, the one who remembers everything and forgets nothing. When the gods themselves dispute, they turn to Thoth, for his records are beyond question. He invented writing, that magical act that captures thought in form, that makes the temporary permanent, that allows wisdom to travel across centuries. The priests of Memphis tell stories of Thoth's sacred library, hidden somewhere in the spiritual realm, containing 42 books of ultimate wisdom. These books, they say, contain everything: the nature of the cosmos, the secret names that give power over all creation, the rhythms of time, the patterns of fate. But Thoth, in his wisdom, knew that humanity was not ready for such complete knowledge. Like fire stolen from heaven, it would consume those who grasped it unprepared. So Thoth became the teacher of mysteries, revealing truth in riddles, hiding wisdom in plain sight. The Egyptians credited him with creating the 365-day calendar, establishing the cycles of the moon, teaching humanity mathematics, medicine, and magic. He was the tongue of Ra, translating divine will into words that creation could understand. When Egyptian priests wanted to indicate that a teaching was of the highest authority and deepest truth, they attributed it to Thoth. In the temple schools, student scribes spent years learning to write the hieroglyphs that Thoth had gifted to humanity. Each symbol was more than a letter or word. It was a key to multiple levels of meaning. The image of a bee might mean the insect, or honey, or the king of Lower Egypt, or industry, or the sweetness of truth, depending on context and the reader's level of initiation. This multiplicity of meaning would become central to how the Emerald Tablet would be understood, each line containing layers upon layers of interpretation, like the skins of an onion that could be peeled back to reveal ever deeper truths. The concept of Thoth as divine scribe would resonate through centuries. Every tradition that followed would seek its own Thoth, its own sacred recorder of heaven's secrets. And when Greek thought met Egyptian wisdom in the melting pot of Alexandria, something extraordinary would emerge from their union: the thrice great convergence. Alexandria, that jewel of the Mediterranean, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC, became the crucible where East met West, where the ancient wisdom of Egypt fused with the philosophical precision of Greece. Picture the city in its glory, the lighthouse of Pharos, one of the seven wonders, casting its beam across the waters. The great library, repository of all human knowledge. The Mausion, where scholars from every corner of the known world gathered to debate and discover. It was here, in this cosmopolitan atmosphere, that a remarkable synthesis occurred. The Greeks who settled in Egypt after Alexander's conquest were fascinated by the ancient Egyptian traditions. They recognized in Thoth qualities similar to their own: Hermes, messenger of the gods, guide of souls, patron of boundaries, and travellers between worlds. But where the Greek Hermes was clever and sometimes tricky, the Egyptian Thoth possessed a gravitas, an ancient authority that commanded deeper reverence. From this recognition arose a new figure, Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great. Why thrice great? The Egyptian priests offered various explanations. Some said it was because he was the greatest philosopher, the greatest priest, and the greatest king. Others claimed he possessed triple wisdom, knowing the three parts of universal philosophy, which were alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. Still others insisted it referred to his mastery over the three worlds: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. But perhaps the most profound interpretation was that Hermes Trismegistus represented three incarnations of wisdom. First as Thoth in the age before the flood, recording divine knowledge on pillars that would survive the catastrophe. Second as Hermes in the age of gods and heroes, teaching humanity the arts of civilization. Third as Trismegistus in historical time, revealing the secret doctrines to prepared initiates. The writings attributed to this figure, known as the Hermetica, claim to preserve the ancient Egyptian wisdom in Greek language. These texts spoke of the nature of God, the structure of the cosmos, the fall and redemption of the soul, the practice of spiritual alchemy. They presented a vision of reality where everything was connected, where the human being was a microcosm reflecting the universal macrocosm, where matter and spirit were not opposite, but different degrees of the same divine emanation. The Hermetic teachings attracted followers from every philosophical school. Platonists found in them confirmation of their theories about the world of forms. Stoics recognized their concepts of cosmic sympathy and divine reason. Gnostics discovered support for their ideas about spiritual knowledge and the ascent of the soul. Jewish mystics noted parallels with their own esoteric traditions. Even early Christians found elements that seemed to prophesy their faith. In this fertile intellectual soil, the legend of the Emerald Tablet would take root. The tablet was said to be Hermes Trismegistus's most concentrated teaching, the summary of all Hermetic wisdom, condensed into 13 lines. Some claimed it was originally written in Phoenician, others in ancient Egyptian, others in the primordial language spoken before the Tower of Babel, but all agreed it contained the fundamental operation of the universe, the key to all transformation, the formula of the great work. Pillars of primordial wisdom. Long before the first pyramid rose from Egyptian sand, so the Hermetic traditions tell us, there existed a golden age when gods walked among humans and wisdom flowed as freely as water. This was the age of the divine kings, when Thoth himself ruled Egypt for 3,226 years, establishing the sacred sciences and recording the fundamental laws of existence. But Thoth, possessing divine foresight, knew that a great catastrophe was approaching. The same flood that would be remembered in the tales of Noah, of Gilgamesh, of Deucalion, was coming to wash away the accumulated wisdom of the ages. And so, according to the most ancient accounts preserved in fragmentary texts and whispered traditions, Thoth inscribed the essential knowledge of creation upon two great pillars. These pillars, the legends say, were made of substances that could survive both flood and fire. One was constructed of marble that no flame could consume, the other of a brick so cunningly composed that no amount of water could dissolve it. Upon these imperishable monuments, Thoth carved the fundamental principles of alchemy, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and magic. He included the true names of things, the correspondences between heaven and earth, the cycles of time, and most importantly, the process of spiritual transformation that would allow humanity to reclaim its divine nature. After the waters receded and civilization slowly rebuilt itself, these pillars were discovered. Some say Abraham found them, and from their study derived his profound understanding of the one God. Others claim that Moses encountered them in the land of Egypt, and that they provided the esoteric wisdom that underlies the Torah. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, mentions antediluvian pillars preserving knowledge, though he attributes them to the descendants of Seth rather than to Thoth. The Greeks had their own version of this tale. They spoke of Hermes creating the pillars, hiding one in the lands of the far south and another in the regions of the north. Seekers of wisdom would journey to the ends of the earth, searching for these monuments, believing that whoever found and understood them would possess the keys to all mysteries. The pillars became a powerful symbol in Hermetic thought, representing the preservation and transmission of divine wisdom through cycles of destruction and renewal. They suggested that truth was eternal, that it could be temporarily hidden but never destroyed, that it would always find ways to preserve itself for future generations of seekers. The emerald tablet itself was often described as having been carved on an emerald pillar, connecting it directly to this tradition of imperishable wisdom. So, the Emerald Vision, the most dramatic account of the emerald tablet's discovery, comes from a mysterious text called the Book of the Secret of Creation, attributed to Apollonius of Tyana, a wandering philosopher and miracle worker of the 1st century AD. Whether Apollonius actually wrote this account, or whether it was attributed to him by later authors seeking to give their work authority, remains debated. But the story itself has captivated imaginations for over 1,000 years. According to this narrative, Apollonius was travelling through the ancient lands, seeking wisdom wherever it might be found. Guided by dreams and omens, he came to a cave hidden beneath a statue of Hermes. The entrance was concealed, known only through divine revelation or the most secret teachings. As Apollonius descended into the darkness, his torch flame flickered against walls covered with symbols that seemed to move and shift in the dancing light. The passage wound downward, the air growing thick with age and mystery. Strange sounds echoed from the depths, perhaps water dripping, perhaps something else. The walls grew damp, and peculiar phosphorescent mosses provided an eerie green glow that made the shadows seem alive. After what felt like hours of descent, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. There, in the centre of this hidden sanctuary, sat the preserved body of Hermes Trismegistus himself. The figure was ancient beyond imagination, yet perfectly preserved, as if sleeping rather than dead. He sat upon a golden throne, and in his hands, clutched against his chest, was a tablet of pure emerald, glowing with its own inner light. The green stone was covered with characters that seemed to shift between languages, readable, one moment in Greek, the next in some script that predated human memory. Apollonius approached with trembling reverence. As he drew near, he claimed, the figure's eyes opened, not with life, but with a kind of eternal awareness. No words were spoken, but knowledge passed between them, an instantaneous transmission of understanding. The tablet's message burned itself into Apollonius's mind, not just as words, but as living truth that reorganized his entire understanding of reality. When he emerged from the cave, Apollonius found that days had passed, though it seemed like only hours. The statue of Hermes above the cave had vanished, as had the cave entrance itself. Only the knowledge remained, those 13 lines of text that contained, as he would later write, the operation of the sun, the fundamental pattern by which all transformation occurs in heaven and earth. Words that transform worlds. The text of the Emerald Tablet, as it has come down to us through various translations, consists of 13 statements that have been interpreted, reinterpreted, and contemplated for over a millennium. Let us examine these words that have shaped so much of Western esoteric thought, beginning with the most famous axiom in all of occult literature. True it is, without falsehood, certain and most true, the tablet begins, an emphatic assertion of its own authority. This triple affirmation echoes the 3 times great nature of Hermes himself, establishing that what follows operates on all levels of reality, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. The text insists on its own truth with a vehemence that suggests it anticipates skepticism, or perhaps that its truth is of such a nature that ordinary understanding might initially reject it. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. Here we encounter the famous hermetic axiom, as above, so below, though in its full form, the statement is more complex. It doesn't say that above and below are identical, but that they are like each other, analogous, following the same patterns. This is the key to hermetic correspondence theory, the idea that the same laws govern all levels of existence, that by understanding one level deeply, we can understand all others, and as all things were from one, by the meditation of one, So all things arose from this one thing by adaptation. The tablet presents a cosmology where multiplicity emerges from unity through a process of meditation or contemplation, then develops through adaptation. This suggests both a metaphysical origin story and a practical methodology. The alchemist, by understanding how the many emerge from the one, can reverse the process, returning multiplicity to unity and achieving transformation. So, the father thereof is the sun, the mother thereof is the moon, the wind carried it in its womb, the earth is its nurse. Here the text becomes more cryptic, speaking in symbols that would occupy alchemists for centuries. Is this describing a chemical process, a spiritual development, the creation of the philosopher's stone, the birth of enlightened consciousness? The genius of the text is that it operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The Father of all perfection in the whole world is here. Its power is integral if it be turned to earth. The tablet speaks of a perfect power that must be turned to earth, brought from potential to actual, from spiritual to material manifestation. This grounding of spiritual force in material reality would become central to practical alchemy and ceremonial magic. Thou shalt separate the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. The process requires discrimination and patience. The work cannot be rushed or forced. The separation must be done sweetly, gently, with care and attention. This is not violent chemistry, but something more like gardening, cultivating, allowing natural processes to unfold while guiding them with wisdom. It ascends from earth to heaven and descends again to earth, and receives the power of things superior and things inferior. By this means shalt thou have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from thee. The tablet describes a circulation, a continuous movement between the poles of existence that gathers power from both. This circulation appears in countless forms throughout hermetic literature. The distillation process of alchemy, the soul's journey through incarnations, the breath moving between lungs and atmosphere, the water cycle between ocean and cloud. Its force is above all force, for it overcomes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. The product of this work, whether one calls it the philosopher's stone, enlightened consciousness, or the medicine of metals, possesses ultimate penetrating power. It can transform both the subtle realms of thought and spirit and the solid realm of matter. So was the world created. From this are and do come admirable adaptations, the means whereof is here. The tablet claims to describe not just a process, but the process, the fundamental pattern of creation itself. By understanding and applying this pattern, the practitioner can produce admirable adaptations that can become a creator following the same blueprint used by the divine architect. Hence, I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. The text concludes by identifying its author and his qualifications. The three parts of philosophy, whether understood as the natural, celestial, and divine sciences, or as body, soul, and spirit, or as the three alchemical principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt, are all united in this supreme understanding. What I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended. The final line brings closure while maintaining mystery. What exactly is the operation of the sun? Is it the creation of gold, the enlightenment of consciousness, the spiritual transformation that turns the lead of ignorance into the gold of wisdom? The tablet offers its secret openly, yet keeps it perfectly hidden, revealed to those with eyes to see, yet remaining opaque to casual observation. Alexandria's green fire. As night falls over Alexandria, the great lighthouse begins its nightly vigil, its beams sweeping across waters that hold the reflected light of stars. In the halls of the great library, oil lamps burn late into the night, their golden flames illuminating texts gathered from every corner of the known world. But in certain chambers, known only to initiates, another fire burns, green as emerald, green as the tablet itself. This is the fire of transformation, neither wholly physical nor purely spiritual, burning in the space between matter and mind, where the real work of alchemy occurs. The walls of these secret chambers are stained with the residue of countless experiments, patches of vermilion and violet, silver and gold, creating abstract patterns that themselves seem to contain encoded wisdom. The air carries the mingled scents of sulfur and mercury, of distilled wines and calcinated salts, of precious resins and mysterious stones, brought from lands beyond the edge of maps. Here, where the wisdom of Egypt meets the logic of Greece, where the mysticism of the East encounters the empiricism of the West, the green fire burns eternally. It consumes yet does not destroy, transforms yet preserves essence, reveals yet maintains mystery. Those who tend this fire speak in whispers, sharing formulas that are as much prayer as procedure, conducting operations that are simultaneously chemical processes and spiritual exercises. They seek the medicine of metals, the elixir of life, the stone of the philosophers, but what they truly seek is understanding of the fundamental process that underlies all change, all growth, all evolution, from potential to actual. The Damascus Road. In the year 636 AD, as the armies of Islam swept northward from the Arabian Peninsula, they encountered something unexpected in the ancient cities of Syria and Mesopotamia. Beyond the material wealth of these conquered territories lay treasures of a different kind. Libraries filled with Greek manuscripts, communities of scholars who called themselves Sabians, and traditions of wisdom that stretch back to Hermes Trismegistus himself. The Sabians of Haran, that ancient city where Abraham once dwelt, presented themselves to their new Muslim rulers as people of the book, claiming Hermes as their prophet and the hermetic texts as their scripture. Whether they were genuine inheritors of hermetic tradition or clever pagans seeking protection under Islamic law remains debated by historians. So, what matters is that they served as a living bridge, transmitting the wisdom of the ancient world into the emerging Islamic civilization. The early Muslim scholars approached these inherited texts with remarkable openness. The Quran itself spoke of Idris, a prophet whom many identified with Enoch of the Hebrew Bible and with Hermes Trismegistus. Here was a figure recognized across three traditions, a universal messenger of divine wisdom. The Caliph al-Ma'mun, ruling from 813 to 833 AD, even claimed to have been visited by Hermes in a dream, an encounter that inspired him to establish the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Damascus became a crucial junction in this transmission. The city's libraries housed Greek texts, translated into Syriac by Christian scholars, creating an intermediate step that would make the journey into Arabic easier. Among these texts were references to the Emerald Tablet, sometimes embedded in larger works, sometimes standing alone as a testament to concentrated wisdom. The Arab alchemist Ibn Umayl, writing in the 10th century, would claim that the tablet's text had been found in a book discovered in the foundations of a temple in Damascus, written in Syriac but translated from Greek, and before that from the ancient Egyptian. The Muslim scholars didn't simply translate these texts, they transformed them. They brought to hermetic wisdom their own sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy, their own spiritual practices and mystical insights. The Emerald Tablet, in passing through Arabic culture, gained new layers of interpretation. Its cryptic references to sun and moon were understood through Islamic cosmology. Its process of transformation was linked to Sufi concepts of spiritual purification. Its assertion of correspondence between above and below resonated with Quranic verses about signs in the heavens and in the self. Perhaps most significantly, the Islamic tradition emphasized the practical application of hermetic wisdom. While acknowledging the spiritual dimensions of alchemy, Muslim scientists also developed sophisticated laboratory techniques, discovering new substances and processes. They insisted that the Emerald Tablet described real operations that could be performed with actual materials even as those operations simultaneously represented stages of spiritual development. This double vision, seeing both material and spiritual dimensions as equally real and interconnected, would profoundly influence how the West would later understand the Hermetic tradition. In the Caliph's laboratory, you climb the marble stairs of the Beit al-Hikmah, Baghdad's house of wisdom, as the afternoon call to prayer echoes across the city of peace. The year is 825 AD, and this circular city, at the crossroads of the world, has become the beating heart of human knowledge. Your soft leather shoes make no sound on the polished floor as you enter the chemical workshop where the empire's finest alchemists pursue the secret of secrets. The first thing that strikes you is the interplay of light and steam. Sunlight streams through coloured glass windows, casting rainbows across rising vapours from dozens of vessels. The air shimmers with heat from carefully tended furnaces, their flames adjusted to precise temperatures through sophisticated systems of bellows and vents. You smell cinnamon and sulphur, rosewater and burning salts, the sharp bite of distilled vinegar mixing with sweet resins imported from India. Your fingers brush against cool alembics of green glass, their swan-necked curves directing condensing vapours into collection vessels. These are innovations unknown to the Greeks and Romans, developed here through patient experimentation and careful observation. On the wooden tables, arranged with geometric precision, sit ceramic crucibles stained with residues of gold and silver, copper and lead. Each vessel bears inscribed symbols, a secret language that combines Arabic letters with ancient signs, creating a code that preserves dangerous knowledge from the uninitiated. You watch the master alchemist, his beard white as the sal ammoniac he grinds in a marble mortar. His movements are deliberate, ritualistic, each gesture accompanied by whispered prayers. He is following a process described in the Emerald Tablet, the circulation of substances through solvic coagula, dissolution and coagulation, the eternal rhythm of taking apart and putting back together. The work requires patience, measured not in hours but in months, sometimes years. Around you, assistants tend to water baths maintaining exact temperatures, their surfaces rippling with concentric circles like the orbits of planets. Others monitor the colour changes in heated compounds, recording each transformation in detailed notebooks. The green of copper becomes the red of its oxide, then the black of its sulfide, then green again in a different form. These colour changes, they believe, mirror the stages of the soul's journey through death and resurrection. You feel the weight of centuries in this room, the accumulated knowledge of Egyptian priests, Greek philosophers, and Arab scientists converging in these experiments. Every operation is both physical and metaphysical. Every transformation a microcosm of universal processes. The emerald tablets promise echoes in the bubble of boiling liquids and the crystallization of cooling salts. As above, so below, the miracle of the one thing revealing itself through infinite adaptations. Jabir's green stone. Among all the alchemists who worked in the Islamic Golden Age, none cast a longer shadow than Jabir ibn Hayyan, known to the Latin West as Geber. Born around 721 AD in Tus, Persia, Jabir became the father of experimental alchemy, transforming Hermetic philosophy into something approaching empirical science, while never abandoning its spiritual dimensions. His interpretation of the Emerald Tablet would influence every alchemist who came after him, Muslim and Christian alike. Jabir claimed to have been initiated into alchemy by the 6th Shia Imam, Jafar al-Sadiq, linking Hermetic wisdom to Islamic mysticism. In his numerous works, over 500 treatises attributed to him, though certainly not all from his own hand, he developed a systematic approach to understanding matter and its transformations. He believed the Emerald Tablet contained the key to all these operations, but that its meaning was deliberately veiled, requiring both intellectual understanding and spiritual preparation to decode. His most profound contribution was the sulfur-mercury theory of metals. According to Jabir, all metals were composed of two principles: sulfur, representing the hot, dry, active, masculine principle associated with the sun and the soul, and mercury, representing the cold, wet, passive, feminine principle associated with the moon and the spirit. The proportions and purity of these principles determined whether a metal would be lead, iron, copper, silver, or gold. This theory gave alchemists a conceptual framework for understanding transformation. Change the proportion or purity of the principles, and you change the metal itself. But Jabir went further. He proposed that there existed a third principle, an agent that could facilitate the transformation of sulfur and mercury into any desired proportion. This agent he sometimes called the elixir, sometimes the medicine, sometimes simply al-iksir, from which we get our word elixir. He described it in terms that clearly reference the emerald tablet, a substance that had risen from earth to heaven and descended again. Gathering the powers of both, it was both material and spiritual, both wet and dry, both fixed and volatile, containing all opposites in perfect balance. Jabir developed precise laboratory procedures for creating this transformative agent. He described processes of calcination, where substances were reduced to ash through intense heat; sublimation, where solids transformed directly to vapor and back to solid; distillation, where liquids were purified through repeated evaporation and condensation. Each process, he insisted, must be performed at specific times, under particular planetary influences, with the operator in the correct spiritual state. The work was as much about transforming the alchemist as transforming the materials. His laboratory innovations were remarkable, Jabir described, and possibly invented numerous pieces of equipment that became standard in chemical work: the alembic for distillation, the retort for heating substances, various furnaces for different temperatures and purposes. He discovered numerous chemical substances and processes: hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, aqua regia, capable of dissolving gold. He developed techniques for dyeing cloth, making steel, preventing rust. All this practical knowledge he saw as manifestations of the single truth expressed in the Emerald Tablet. The influence of Jabir's work spread throughout the Islamic world and beyond. His books were translated into Latin in 12th century Spain, where they ignited the European alchemical tradition. Christian alchemists would spend centuries trying to decode his cryptic recipes, his veiled references, his numerical codes. The Jabirian corpus became a labyrinth of wisdom, where each text seemed to reference others, where practical procedures were interwoven with mystical speculation, where the secret of the Emerald Tablet was simultaneously revealed and concealed in endless variations. Jabir wrote that the stone described in the Emerald Tablet was green not by chance, but by necessity. Green was the colour of generation, of life, of the vegetative soul that could grow and transform. It was the colour of Venus and copper, metals associated with love and attraction, the force that draws opposites together. It was the colour of the secret fire that didn't burn but transformed, the living mercury that was not common quicksilver, but something far more subtle. This green stone, this viriditas, as later Latin alchemists would call it, was both the goal of the work and the means by which the work was accomplished. The Andalusian Bridge, the Iberian Peninsula, in the 11th and 12th centuries, became the great mixing bowl of Mediterranean civilization. In the libraries of Córdoba, Toledo, and Seville, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars worked side by side, translating the wisdom of one culture into the language of another. It was here, in these sun-drenched scriptoriums, where the scent of orange blossoms mixed with the smell of fresh ink, that the Emerald Tablet would make its decisive journey into Latin and thus into the consciousness of Christian Europe. Toledo, reconquered by Christian forces in 1085 AD, became the epicenter of this translation movement. The city's libraries contained treasures beyond counting, Arabic translations of Greek texts that had been lost to the West for centuries, original works of Islamic science and philosophy, Hebrew manuscripts preserving ancient wisdom. Archbishop Raymond of Toledo, recognizing the value of this inheritance, established a translation school that would transform European thought. Among the translators working in Toledo was Hugo of Santalla, a mysterious figure who appears in the historical record primarily through his translations. Sometime around 1140 AD, Hugo rendered into Latin a text called the Kitab sur al-Khaliqa, the Book of the Secret of Creation, attributed to Balinus, the Arabic name for Apollonius of Tyana. Embedded within this larger work was the text of the Emerald Tablet, making its first known appearance in Latin, the language that would carry it throughout medieval and Renaissance Europe. Hugo's translation was literal, sometimes awkwardly so, preserving the cryptic nature of the original, while adding new ambiguities through the challenges of rendering Arabic concepts in Latin terms. Where the Arabic spoke of specific alchemical processes, Latin sometimes lacked equivalent technical vocabulary, where Islamic mysticism had informed the text's interpretation. Christian theology would provide new frameworks for understanding. The tablet, in crossing linguistic boundaries, became even more multifaceted, even more open to varied interpretation. The work of translation was not merely mechanical. The translators were themselves scholars, often adding commentary, clarification, or their own interpretations. They worked in teams. A native Arabic speaker would render the text into Romance vernacular, while a Latin scholar would transform the vernacular into scholarly Latin. In these collaborations, Jewish scholars often served as crucial intermediaries, fluent in Arabic from living under Muslim rule and in Romance from their current circumstances, while possessing their own traditions of esoteric interpretation that enriched the transmitted texts. The Spain of this period was experiencing its own flowering of mystical and esoteric thought. The Kabbalah was developing among Jewish communities, Sufism flourished among Muslims, and Christian mysticism was entering a period of intense creativity. The Emerald Tablet, with its promise of universal wisdom transcending religious boundaries, found eager readers in all three communities. Each tradition recognized something familiar, yet tantalizingly different in its compact verses. Breath of the desert wind. Listen to the whisper of sand moving across ancient stones, the soft susurration that has carried secrets for millennia. Feel how knowledge flows like these tiny grains, each particle a fragment of wisdom worn smooth by its journey through time. The desert wind that carries this sand knows no borders, recognizes no kingdoms, acknowledges no difference between the learned and the ignorant. It simply moves, and in moving, transports. See how a single grain of sand might begin its journey in the quarries of Egypt, where ancient workers carved hieroglyphs into temple walls. The wind lifts it, carries it across the Mediterranean, deposits it in the gardens of Andalusia, where scholars debate the nature of reality. Another gust sends it north, across the Pyrenees, into the courtyards of Paris, where it settles on the manuscript a monk is copying, a translation of a text that claims to hold the secret of creation. The sand accumulates in the corners of libraries, in the crevices of ancient books, between the pages where pressed flowers mark important passages. It carries with it microscopic fragments of papyrus from Alexandria, particles of parchment from Baghdad, infinitesimal pieces of paper from Toledo. Each grain becomes a messenger, bearing the dust of civilizations, the residue of wisdom, the material memory of human seeking. This is how the Emerald Tablet travelled, not as a single magnificent journey, but as countless tiny translations, each carrying the whole, while adding its own interpretation, like the sand that both preserves and erodes. Each transmission both maintained the essential message and wore away certain meanings while revealing others. The tablet's wisdom adapted to each landscape it crossed, like how the same wind sounds different through Egyptian reeds, Persian gardens, and Spanish olive groves. Roger Bacon's secret chamber. In the year 1267 AD, within the grey stone walls of Oxford's Franciscan friary, Roger Bacon bent over a manuscript that could cost him his freedom. The Chancellor of the university had forbidden the teaching of certain Arabic texts, declaring them dangerous to Christian souls. But here, behind a locked door, in a chamber known only to his most trusted assistants, Bacon pursued the forbidden knowledge with the passion of a man who believed he was uncovering God's own blueprint for creation. The room was unlike any other in 13th century Oxford. Glass vessels of Bacon's own design caught the weak English sunlight, focusing it into beams that illuminated swirling vapours and crystallizing solutions. On the walls hung diagrams that merged Christian symbolism with hermetic figures. The Trinity, expressed through alchemical principles, the resurrection of Christ paralleled with the death and rebirth of metals. Hidden behind a false panel lay Bacon's most precious possessions: Arabic manuscripts smuggled from Spain, including his own translation of the Secret of Secrets, which contained his version of the Emerald Tablet. Bacon was convinced that the tablet contained encoded instructions for creating not just the philosopher's stone, but something greater, a universal science that would unite all knowledge. He believed that Hermes Trismegistus had been a real person, perhaps even a contemporary of Moses, who had received divine revelation about the structure of reality. The tablet's 13 statements, Bacon argued, corresponded to profound truths about optics, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Each line could be read on 7 levels, from the purely physical to the purely divine. His interpretation was radical for its time. While most medieval scholars approached alchemy through allegory and spiritual metaphor, Bacon insisted on experimental verification. The tablet said, "Thou shalt separate the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry." Bacon took this literally, developing new techniques for distillation and filtration. He created stronger glass vessels that could withstand higher temperatures. He invented methods for measuring specific weights and volumes. His gunpowder experiments, which would later make him famous, grew directly from his attempts to understand the tablet's reference to the power that overcomes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. But Bacon's work went beyond mere chemistry. He saw in the Emerald Tablet a model for understanding light itself, that first creation of God. The circulation described in the tablet, ascending from earth to heaven and descending again, matched his observations of how light behaved, reflecting and refracting, carrying images and influences. His work on optics, revolutionary for its time, was deeply influenced by hermetic ideas about the correspondence between the eye and the sun, between human perception and divine illumination. Late into the night, Bacon would encode his findings in cryptograms and ciphers, hiding his most dangerous discoveries in seemingly innocent theological treatises. He developed a secret alphabet, mixing Latin, Greek, Arabic, and invented characters. His notebooks, even today, contain passages that have never been fully decoded. He lived in constant fear of accusation of heresy, knowing that his Franciscan superiors already viewed him with suspicion. Yet he couldn't stop his pursuit, driven by the conviction that he was on the verge of recovering the Prisca Theologia, the ancient theology that had been known to Adam before the fall, the philosopher's green dream. By the 14th century, the Emerald Tablet had become the foundational text of European alchemy, spawning thousands of commentaries, interpretations, and elaborations. Every serious alchemist felt compelled to offer their own understanding of its cryptic verses, and from this collective meditation arose a rich, symbolic language that would influence Western thought far beyond the laboratory. The tablet was now understood to describe the creation of the philosopher's stone, that miraculous substance capable of transmuting base metals into gold, curing all diseases and granting extended life. But what exactly was this stone? Each alchemist seemed to have a different answer, yet all claimed their interpretation came from proper understanding of Hermes's words. Some said the stone was a red powder, others a transparent crystal, still others a heavy oil that solidified upon exposure to air. But many insisted that its fundamental nature was green, like the tablet itself, green like the secret fire of the sages, green like the lion that devoured the sun in alchemical imagery. Medieval manuscript illuminations from this period show remarkable depictions of the tablet's operations. The sun and moon, mentioned as father and mother, appear as a king and queen engaged in chemical wedding, their union producing a hermaphroditic child that represents the stone. The wind that carries it in its womb is shown as a great bird, sometimes an eagle, sometimes a pelican feeding its young with its own blood. The earth nurse appears as a woman suckling a strange infant, whose skin shifts through all colours of the peacock's tail. The separation of the subtle from the gross became associated with elaborate laboratory procedures. Alchemists developed sophisticated techniques for fractional distillation, repeatedly separating and recombining substances at different temperatures. They spoke of the oil that does not wet the hands, the water that does not wet, the fire that does not burn. These paradoxical substances were both literal chemical products and symbols for states of consciousness, for the alchemist's own spiritual refinement. The circulation described in the tablet, ascending from earth to heaven and descending again, was mapped onto the astrological houses and the rotation of the seasons. Spring's germination, summer's growth, autumn's harvest, and winter's death and putrefaction became stages in the alchemical work. The process had to begin at the correct astrological moment, usually in Aries when the sun's strength was increasing, and proceed through a year or more of carefully controlled operations. Colour changes became crucial indicators of progress. The work must begin with the nigredo, the blackening, where the matter died and putrefied like a seed in the earth. This was followed by the albedo, the whitening, where the purified essence emerged like the first shoots of spring. Then came the citrinitas, the yellowing, though some alchemists disputed whether this was a separate stage or merely a transition. Finally arrived the rubedo, the reddening, where the stone achieved its full power. But underlying all these colour changes was the viriditas, the greenness, the living quality that distinguished true alchemical transformation from mere chemical reaction. The stone's green nature connected it to Venus and copper, to the force of attraction and generation. Medieval alchemists noted that copper was the only metal that turned green when exposed to air, forming verdigris. This voluntary transformation, without external fire, suggested that copper contained a special vitality, a seed of the stone itself. They spoke of the green lion, a symbol that could mean raw antimony, or unrefined mercurial water, or the secret solvent that dissolved gold, or the life force itself that animated all nature. Dreams played a significant role in alchemical practice. Alchemists reported visions of green gardens, where metallic trees bore crystalline fruit, of emerald cities where the buildings themselves were alive, of vast green seas from which arose islands of pure gold. These dreams were not dismissed as mere fantasy, but studied as communications from the subtle realm, as guidance from what they called the interior master, who revealed the tablet's secrets to prepared souls. The influence of the tablet extended beyond practical alchemy into medicine, where the search for the universal medicine paralleled the quest for the philosopher's stone. Physicians influenced by hermetic thought developed the doctrine of signatures, reading the correspondence between the forms of plants and the organs they could heal. They created complex medicinal elixirs that required months of preparation, following processes that mirrored the tablet's operations. The famous theriac, a compound medicine containing dozens of ingredients, was prepared according to alchemical principles, its creation timed to planetary influences, its ingredients subjected to circulation and purification. Venice at twilight. As the sun descends behind the palazzos of Venice, painting the canals in shades of amber and rose, the city transforms into something between reality and dream. This is 1520 AD, and Venice has become the printing capital of Europe, its workshops producing more books than all other European cities combined. In this floating city, where East meets West, where merchants trade in spices and silk alongside manuscripts and ideas, the emerald tablet finds new life in the revolutionary medium of print. Gondolas glide through the narrow waterways, their black hulls disappearing into shadow, while their passengers remain illuminated by the last rays of light. Some carry ordinary merchants returning from the Rialto. Others transport more unusual cargo. Alchemists and mystics drawn to Venice's relative freedom, where the Inquisition's reach is weakened by the Republic's fierce independence. In waterproof cases, protected from the canal's spray, they carry manuscripts that will soon be transformed into printed books, spreading hermetic wisdom faster than ever before. The printing workshops near San Marco work through the night, their windows glowing like furnaces. Inside, the rhythmic clank of the presses mingles with the splash of water against stone foundations. The air is thick with the smell of ink, that mixture of linseed oil and lampblack that marks this new age. Craftsmen set type for a new edition of the Emerald Tablet, now accompanied by elaborate commentaries and symbolic engravings. Each letter is placed with the same care an alchemist might use in measuring precious materials. In the reflected light of the canals, Venice itself becomes an alchemical vessel, a retort where cultures dissolve and recombine. Greek scholars fleeing Constantinople brought ancient manuscripts. Jewish Kabbalists expelled from Spain carry their own esoteric traditions. German Protestants seek refuge from religious persecution. Italian humanists rediscover classical texts. All these streams of wisdom flow together in Venice's labyrinthine passages, creating new combinations, unexpected syntheses, admirable adaptations, as the tablet would say. Ficino's Platonic fire. In 1460 AD, a young scholar named Marsilio Ficino received from Cosimo de' Medici a gift that would transform European thought. A complete manuscript of the Corpus Hermeticum in Greek, recently arrived from Macedonia. Cosimo, on his deathbed, ordered Ficino to set aside his translation of Plato and immediately render these Hermetic texts into Latin. Such was the reputation of Hermes Trismegistus that even Plato could wait. Ficino's villa outside Florence became a new academy, a revival of Plato's ancient school, but infused with Hermetic wisdom. Here, surrounded by gardens designed according to celestial correspondences, where each plant and statue held symbolic significance, Ficino and his circle explored the Prisca Theologia, the ancient theology they believed had been revealed to humanity's earliest sages. The Emerald Tablet, in Ficino's interpretation, was not merely an alchemical recipe, but a compressed statement of this primordial wisdom. Working by candlelight in his study, the walls covered with astrological charts and hermetic diagrams, Ficino developed a new understanding of the tablet's meaning. The correspondence between above and below wasn't just metaphorical. It described actual forces, what he called spiritual sympathies, that connected all levels of reality. The planets above influenced metals, and plants below through invisible chains of correspondence. The human soul, positioned between heaven and earth, could learn to read and manipulate these connections. Ficino practiced what he called natural magic, a manipulation of cosmic sympathies based on hermetic principles. He created talismans at astrologically propitious moments, composed music tuned to planetary frequencies, prepared medicines that captured celestial influences. His interpretation of the tablet's operation of the sun involved literally capturing solar energy through gold, yellow flowers, and specific musical modes. He believed that by surrounding oneself with solar correspondences, one could draw down the sun's vivifying power, combating the melancholy that plagued scholars who spent too much time under Saturn's influence. His translation and commentary on the Hermetic texts, including extensive discussion of the Emerald Tablet, spread throughout Europe's intellectual circles. Suddenly, Hermes Trismegistus was being discussed in universities, quoted in sermons, cited by natural philosophers. The tablet's assertion that all things came from one through meditation became proof of divine creation through the word. Its description of circulation between heaven and earth illustrated the soul's journey toward God. Even its alchemical symbolism could be read as Christian allegory, with the transformation of base metals representing the redemption of fallen humanity. The Medici court embraced this hermetic revival with enthusiasm. Lorenzo the Magnificent commissioned artworks encoding hermetic wisdom. Botticelli's Primavera, with its complex symbolism of transformation and renewal, can be read as a meditation on the tablet's operations. Architects designed buildings according to hermetic proportions, attempting to create structures that would channel celestial influences. Gardens were laid out as microcosms, with fountains representing the circulation of waters above and below, with plantings that trace the journey from earth to heaven and back again. But Ficino's influence extended beyond Florence. His correspondence included scholars, princes, and prelates across Europe. Through his letters, often accompanied by detailed horoscopes and hermetic advice, he spread a new vision of humanity's place in the cosmos. Humans were not merely fallen creatures awaiting salvation, but potential magi, capable of understanding and working with the hidden forces of nature. The Emerald Tablet provided the theoretical foundation for this empowered view of humanity. Its promise that, by this means, shalt thou have the glory of the whole world, taken as divine authorization for the pursuit of knowledge and power over nature. The Magus of Mortlake. You stand in John Dee's legendary library at Mortlake, the year 1583 AD, surrounded by more books than exist in most universities. The afternoon light filters through diamond-paned windows, illuminating motes of dust that dance like tiny planets in their own celestial spheres. The smell of old parchment mingles with sulphur from the laboratory next door, where Dee's assistant, Edward Kelly, tends the furnaces that have burned continuously for months. Your fingers trail across leather spines bearing titles in a dozen languages: Greek geometries, Arabic astronomical tables, Hebrew Kabbalah, Latin alchemical treatises. Here stands the greatest private library in England, 4,000 volumes collected over a lifetime of seeking, but your attention is drawn to a special shelf, protected by a curtain of deep green velvet. Behind it rest Dee's most precious texts, including 7 different versions of the Emerald Tablet, each with marginalia in Dee's precise hand. You can hear Dee himself in the next room, his voice rising and falling in the cadence of ceremonial invocation. He is performing what he calls an action, attempting to communicate with angelic intelligences through a polished obsidian mirror that once belonged to Aztec priests. The angels, Dee believes, can explain the tablet's deepest mysteries, can reveal the language spoken before Babel, can teach the true pronunciation of the words of creation. The floor beneath your feet is marked with symbols, a great seal incorporating hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Enochian elements. Every inch of this house has been designed according to occult principles. The proportions follow the golden ratio. The rooms are oriented to cardinal directions and planetary associations. Hidden in the walls are talismans for protection and illumination. This is not merely a home, but a philosophical instrument, a 3-dimensional expression of the hermetic axiom, as above, so below. On Dee's writing desk lies his current work, a commentary on the Emerald Tablet that attempts to reconcile its teaching with Protestant Christianity, Euclidean mathematics, and the new astronomy of Copernicus. His interpretation is radical. The tablet describes not just earthly alchemy, but the mechanics of the cosmos itself. The circulation between earth and heaven is the actual path of celestial influences. The separation of subtle from gross explains how light travels through the crystalline spheres. The one thing from which all arose is the primordial monad, the mathematical unity that generates all number and form. You feel the weight of expectation in this room. Dee serves as advisor to Queen Elizabeth, casting horoscopes for naval expeditions, choosing auspicious dates for coronations. He corresponds with the greatest minds of Europe, sharing ciphered messages about the progress of the great work. Yet he also feels the constant pressure of suspicion. Neighbours whisper that he conjures demons. Rival scholars accuse him of heresy. Even now, as you stand in his sanctuary, you know that in a few years, an angry mob will burn this library, destroying irreplaceable manuscripts, scattering wisdom that took lifetimes to accumulate. But today, in this moment, the work continues. The green truth of the tablet persists. Transformation proceeds. The circulation between heaven and earth maintains its eternal rhythm. Newton's hidden heresy. In the plague year of 1665 AD, a young Isaac Newton retreated to his family's farm in Woolsthorpe. While history remembers this as the period when he developed calculus and formulated his initial insights into gravity, Newton himself was equally occupied with another pursuit: the decipherment of the emerald tablet and the recreation of the philosopher's stone. For Newton, these were not separate endeavours. The force that caused apples to fall and planets to orbit was intimately connected to the power described in the hermetic texts. Newton's laboratory work remained secret during his lifetime, hidden from colleagues who would have been scandalized to learn that the greatest mathematical mind of the age spent decades pursuing alchemical transmutation. His notebooks, only fully examined in the 20th century, reveal over 1 million words on alchemy, including multiple translations and interpretations of the emerald tablet. He learned enough Arabic and Latin to read the tablet in multiple versions, comparing translations, seeking the original meaning behind centuries of interpretation. His translation was precise, mathematical, treating each word as a variable in an equation that described reality's fundamental operations. Where the tablet said, "Its power is integral if it be turned to earth," Newton saw a description of force vectors, of potential energy becoming kinetic. The circulation between heaven and earth wasn't metaphor, but a literal description of gravitational attraction and the conservation of energy. The one thing from which all arose was not mystical unity, but actual physical force, the divine power that moved all matter according to mathematical law. Newton believed that the ancients had possessed a complete science of nature, encoded in myth and hermetic texts, to preserve it from the unworthy. His Principia Mathematica, he privately thought, was not discovery but rediscovery, a mathematical reformulation of truths known to Hermes Trismegistus. The inverse square law of gravitation was hidden in the tablet's description of forces, superior and inferior. The conservation of momentum was implicit in the eternal circulation. Even his work on optics, breaking white light into the spectrum, seemed predicted by the tablet's colour symbolism. In his private laboratory, equipped with furnaces he designed himself, Newton performed thousands of experiments. He believed the secret ingredient mentioned cryptically in alchemical texts was a form of mercury unknown to common chemistry, what the adepts called philosophical mercury, or mercury of the philosophers. This wasn't ordinary quicksilver, but a substance that could dissolve gold sweetly without violence, creating a solution that could then be manipulated according to the tablet's instructions. He spent particular effort on antimony compounds, believing that the star Regulus of antimony, with its crystalline formation resembling celestial patterns, was a key to the work. His notebooks reveal elaborate calculations of the best times to begin operations, correlating planetary positions with chemical processes. He tracked color changes obsessively, noting every shift from black to white to yellow to red, seeking the sequence that would indicate true transmutation rather than mere chemical reaction. He developed a private vocabulary, referring to different substances by astronomical symbols, encoding his procedures in language that looked like celestial mechanics, but actually described laboratory operations. Newton was convinced that Solomon's temple had been designed according to the principles of the Emerald Tablet, its proportions encoding the structure of the cosmos. He spent years analyzing biblical descriptions of the temple, creating detailed architectural reconstructions that incorporated his understanding of harmonic proportions and cosmic correspondences. The temple's Holy of Holies, he believed, was an alchemical chamber where the Ark of the Covenant served as a philosophical vessel for the ultimate transformation. The contradiction between Newton's public persona as the champion of mechanical philosophy and his private pursuit of alchemical transmutation has puzzled historians. But for Newton himself, there was no contradiction. The mechanical forces he described mathematically were the outer manifestation of the inner principles described in the tablet. Gravity was the divine attraction, the sympathy that connected heaven and earth. The laws of motion were the eternal patterns by which the one thing produced all its admirable adaptations. His science was hermetic philosophy, expressed in the language of mathematics. The Rosicrucian Echo. In 1614 AD, the peaceful German town of Kassel woke to find mysterious broadsides nailed to church doors and public buildings. The text announced the existence of a secret brotherhood, the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross, inheritors of ancient wisdom, preparing humanity for a new age of enlightenment. At the heart of their teaching, the manifestos claimed, lay the secret of secrets revealed in the Emerald Tablet, now at last, ready to transform European civilization. According to the Fama Fraternitatis, their founder, Christian Rosenkreutz, had travelled to the East in the 14th century, studying with Arab and Hebrew sages who taught him the true interpretation of the hermetic texts. He had returned to Europe with the philosopher's stone, the universal medicine, and most importantly, a complete understanding of the correspondence between macrocosm and microcosm described in the tablet. This knowledge had been preserved and developed by a secret brotherhood for 2 centuries, and now they were ready to share it with worthy seekers. The response was immediate and dramatic. Across Europe, scholars, physicians, and alchemists published open letters attempting to contact the mysterious brotherhood. They decoded supposed Rosicrucian symbols in older texts, finding hidden references to the rose and cross in everything from Dante to medieval cathedral architecture. The Emerald Tablet was re-examined through this new lens, its compact verses now seen as the condensed curriculum of Rosicrucian initiation. Whether the Rosicrucians existed as described or were, as many historians suspect, a literary fiction designed to promote hermetic reform, their impact was real. Rosicrucian societies formed across Europe, each claiming authentic transmission, while developing their own interpretation of the tablet's wisdom. They created elaborate initiation rituals based on alchemical symbolism, with candidates symbolically dying and being reborn, ascending from earth to heaven and descending again, gathering the powers of things superior and inferior. The Rosicrucian reading of the tablet emphasized its social and political dimensions. The transformation it described wasn't just personal or chemical, but societal. The base metals to be transmuted were human institutions corrupted by ignorance and greed. The philosopher's stone was enlightened education that would transform humanity itself. The circulation between heaven and earth represented the free flow of knowledge between all levels of society, breaking down the barriers that kept wisdom locked in universities and courts. While common people remained in darkness, enlightenment shadows. As the 18th century dawned, bringing with it the age of reason, the Emerald Tablet retreated into shadow. The new mechanical philosophy had no room for correspondence between above and below, for spiritual sympathies, for metals that could perfect themselves into gold. Chemistry was separating from alchemy, astronomy from astrology, medicine from magic. The tablet's promise of transformation through mysterious processes seemed increasingly like superstition, an embarrassment to the emerging scientific worldview. Yet the tablet didn't disappear. It went underground, preserved in Masonic lodges, where the tools of architecture became symbols of spiritual construction. It survived in the private studies of natural philosophers, who publicly proclaimed mechanical materialism while privately pursuing the great work. It endured in the margins of official knowledge, in footnotes to chemical texts, in the appendices of historical works, waiting for a generation that would once again be ready to consider its possibilities. Even the most rigorous scientists couldn't entirely escape Hermetic influence. The concept of chemical affinity, central to 18th century chemistry, was essentially a scientific reformulation of Hermetic correspondence. The search for a unified theory of forces echoed the tablet's assertion that all things arose from one. The conservation of matter, demonstrated by Lavoisier, seemed to validate the Hermetic principle that nothing was created or destroyed, only transformed. The tablet found new readers among poets and artists who sensed in its cryptic verses truths that transcended rational analysis. They recognized in its imagery the language of imagination, the logic of dreams, the grammar of transformation that govern not just matter, but meaning itself. William Blake, who called himself a mental alchemist, created visual interpretations of Hermetic processes. His illuminated books can be read as extended meditations on the tablet's operations, showing the human journey from innocence through experience to higher innocence, ascending from earth to heaven and descending again renewed. The Romantic Resurgence. With the dawn of the 19th century came a renewed fascination with mystery, with the invisible forces that mechanical philosophy had banished from nature. German Romantic philosophers, rebelling against the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment, rediscovered in Hermetic texts a vision of nature as living, purposeful, filled with hidden correspondences and secret sympathies. The Emerald Tablet, with its promise of participation in cosmic processes, spoke directly to the Romantic soul. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Germany's greatest poet and a serious student of alchemy, wove the tablet's principles throughout his masterwork Faust. The protagonist's journey from scholar to magician to redeemer follows the tablet's circulation, ascending from earth to heaven through knowledge and desire, descending again through love and sacrifice. Faust's famous opening complaint that he has studied philosophy, law, medicine, and theology yet knows nothing worth knowing is the starting point of every alchemical quest. His turn to magic, seeking the force that binds the universe together, echoes every adept who has contemplated the tablet's promise of understanding the one thing from which all proceeds. Goethe's scientific work, particularly his theory of colours, was deeply influenced by Hermetic thought. He rejected Newton's mechanical explanation of light, proposing instead that colour arose from the interaction of light and darkness, a dynamic polarity that recalled the tablet's reconciliation of opposites. His observation of plant metamorphosis, how all parts of a plant were transformations of a single archetypal leaf, seemed to confirm the Hermetic doctrine of unity, producing diversity through adaptation. The German Naturphilosophen went even further, building entire philosophical systems on Hermetic foundations. Friedrich Schelling saw in the tablet's description of circulation the fundamental process of nature itself, the absolute expressing itself through polarization and then returning to unity at a higher level. Each natural phenomenon, from magnetism to organism growth, demonstrated this pattern. The philosopher's stone wasn't a physical substance but consciousness itself, the point where subject and object unite, where the observer realizes their identity with the observed. This romantic Hermetic revival influenced not just philosophy, but practical science. Hans Christian Ørsted, discoverer of electromagnetism, was deeply influenced by natural philosophy and its Hermetic roots. His search for connections between electricity and magnetism was motivated by the belief, derived from the tablet, that all forces were manifestations of a single underlying power. When he observed a compass needle deflected by an electric current, he saw it as confirmation of the ancient wisdom that all things are one. The revival spread beyond Germany. In England, Samuel Taylor Coleridge studied German philosophy and hermetic texts, incorporating their insights into his theory of imagination as the echo of divine creation. In France, Eliphas Lévy began the work of synthesizing hermetic wisdom with other esoteric traditions, creating the foundation for modern ceremonial magic. In America, transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau found in hermetic correspondence theory support for their vision of nature as spiritual scripture. Echoes in stone and symbol. Walk through any European city built before the 20th century, and you walk through a landscape encoded with hermetic wisdom. The Gothic cathedrals, those stone symphonies reaching toward heaven, embody the tablet's circulation in their very architecture. The faithful enter at ground level, ascend through nave and transept, their spirits lifted by columns and arches that seem to deny gravity, reaching the altar, where heaven and earth meet in the Eucharistic transformation, then descend again, changed, carrying something of heaven back to earth. Look closely at the decorative programs of these buildings, and you find hermetic symbols everywhere. The green man, face formed of living leaves, peers from column capitals, embodying the viriditas, the green force of transformation. Alchemical animals process around doorways, the pelican feeding its young with its own blood, the phoenix rising from ashes, the dragon eating its tail. These aren't mere decoration, but instruction, teaching the tablet's operations to those with eyes to see. The Masonic lodges that proliferated in the 18th and 19th centuries made the tablet's principles central to their initiatic system. The candidate for initiation dies symbolically and is reborn, ascends through degrees that correspond to levels of understanding, learns to work with both operative tools and speculative principles. The square and compass, the lodge's most recognizable symbols, represent the tablet's things superior and things inferior, heaven and earth united in the act of creation. Every Masonic temple is designed as a microcosm, its proportions encoding cosmic harmonies, its rituals reenacting the fundamental processes of transformation. These hermetic influences shape the design of entire cities. Washington, D.C., laid out by Freemasons, incorporates hermetic geometry in its street plan. Paris, redesigned by Haussmann, includes sightlines and proportions that follow hermetic principles. Even industrial architecture, those temples to the new mechanical age, unconsciously reproduced hermetic patterns. Factories with their furnaces below and offices above, their raw materials transformed through circulation and refinement, their products emerging perfected from processes of separation and recombination. The persistence of these symbols and structures suggests that the tablet's influence operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, that its patterns are somehow fundamental to how humans organize space and meaning. Even in an age that had officially rejected hermetic philosophy, its principles continue to shape the built environment, creating cities and buildings that taught the tablet's lessons in stone and steel, glass and concrete. Blavatsky's Emerald Light. In 1875 AD, in a modest apartment on Irving Place in New York City, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky sat surrounded by cigarette smoke and scattered manuscripts, dictating to her secretary words that would reshape Western esotericism. The Russian noblewoman turned spiritual teacher was creating a new synthesis, weaving together threads from Hindu philosophy, Buddhist meditation, Kabbalistic cosmology, and at the center of it all, the hermetic wisdom of the Emerald Tablet. Blavatsky claimed to have encountered the tablet's wisdom, not through books, but through direct transmission from the masters of wisdom, advanced beings who preserved ancient knowledge in hidden monasteries in Tibet and Egypt. These masters, she said, had shown her that the Emerald Tablet was not merely an alchemical text, but a fragment of the stanzas of Xian, primordial verses that describe the evolution of cosmos and consciousness. The correspondence between above and below wasn't just philosophical principle, but literal description of how divine thought descended through planes of existence to become physical matter. Her interpretation revolutionized occult understanding of the tablet. The one thing from which all arose was the absolute, the unknowable source that Hindu philosophy called Para-Brahman. The meditation of one was the cosmic ideation that began each cycle of manifestation. The sun and moon, as father and mother, represented the positive and negative aspects of the universal life force, what she called Fohat, the divine energy that built atoms and worlds according to the same pattern. The circulation between heaven and earth described the rounds and races through which consciousness evolved, ascending from mineral through plant and animal to human and beyond. Theosophy, the movement Blavatsky founded, spread rapidly through America and Europe, attracting intellectuals, artists, and seekers dissatisfied with both traditional religion and materialist science. The Theosophical Society's seal incorporated hermetic symbols, the Ouroboros serpent swallowing its tail, representing the tablet's eternal circulation, the hexagram uniting upward and downward triangles, embodying as above so below, the Ankh, key of life, suggesting the transformation that unlocks immortality. In her massive work, The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888 AD, Blavatsky devoted extensive commentary to hermetic principles. She argued that modern science was rediscovering truths known to Hermes Trismegistus. The conservation of energy confirmed the tablet's teaching that nothing was lost in transformation. Evolution demonstrated the ascent from earth to heaven. The periodic table showed how all elements arose from one primordial substance through different modes of vibration. But Blavatsky's most radical contribution was democratizing hermetic wisdom. Where previous generations had guarded alchemical secrets in Latin texts and private laboratories, she published openly, in modern language, claiming that humanity had evolved to a point where such knowledge could be safely shared. The philosopher's stone wasn't a physical substance, but a state of consciousness achievable through meditation and moral development. The tablet's operations could be performed not just in laboratory retorts, but in the crucible of daily life. Her apartment became a salon where East met West in unprecedented synthesis. Hindu swamis discussed the Vedas with Jewish Kabbalists. Buddhist monks debated Christian mystics. Scientists explored connections between atoms and astrology. Artists found inspiration for new forms of expression. And through it all, the Emerald Tablet served as a universal key, its compact wisdom providing common ground for traditions that had never before recognized their fundamental unity. The theosophical interpretation would influence countless spiritual movements that followed: anthroposophy, arcane school, Agni Yoga, and eventually the New Age movement itself. Each would offer its own reading of the tablet, but all would build on Blavatsky's fundamental insight that hermetic wisdom wasn't ancient superstition, but timeless truth, as relevant to the modern world as it had been to Egyptian temples and medieval laboratories. The Golden Dawn Rising. In 1888 AD, in a modest Masonic hall in London, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn held its first initiation ceremony. The candidate, blindfolded and bound, was led through symbolic death and rebirth, reenacting the transformation described in the Emerald Tablet. As the blindfold was removed, they beheld for the first time the Order's inner temple, its walls covered with hermetic symbols, its altar bearing representations of the tablet itself, rendered in emerald green and gold. The Golden Dawn synthesized centuries of Western esoteric tradition into a systematic curriculum of spiritual development. At its heart lay the practical application of hermetic principles. Members progressed through grades corresponding to the Kabbalistic tree of life, each grade requiring mastery of specific aspects of the tablet's operations. They learned to create talismans during appropriate planetary hours, to perform rituals that united opposing forces, to achieve in consciousness the circulation between heaven and earth. The Order's interpretation of the tablet emphasized its psychological dimensions. The base metals to be transformed were aspects of the personality. The furnace was focused will. The various chemical operations corresponded to mental and emotional processes. Calcination was the burning away of ego, dissolution, the release of rigid beliefs, coagulation, the formation of integrated consciousness. Members kept detailed magical diaries, recording their experiments in consciousness with the same precision earlier alchemists had documented laboratory work. Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, one of the Order's founders, created elaborate rituals based on the tablet's symbolism. The most profound was the chemical wedding, where participants enacted the union of sun and moon, experiencing in their own being the marriage of opposites that produced the philosopher's stone. These rituals used colour, sound, perfume, and movement to create states of consciousness, where the tablet's abstract principles became lived experience. The Golden Dawn's influence extended far beyond its modest membership. William Butler Yeats found in its teachings inspiration for poetry that encoded hermetic wisdom. Aleister Crowley, though later expelled, carried its methods into his own system of thelema. Israel Regardie preserved its knowledge for future generations. The Order's systematic approach to hermetic practice became the template for virtually every subsequent Western magical organization. Even as the original Order fragmented through personality conflicts and scandals, its interpretation of the tablet persisted. The idea that hermetic transformation could be achieved through ritual practice, that consciousness itself could be the philosophical vessel where transmutation occurred, opened the tablet's wisdom to those without access to chemical laboratories or ancient manuscripts. The great work could be performed in any dedicated room with simple tools by anyone willing to undertake the discipline of self-transformation. Jung's Emerald Mirror. In 1928 AD, in his tower retreat at Bollingen beside Lake Zurich, Carl Gustav Jung sat before a manuscript of Aurora Consurgens, a medieval alchemical text attributed to Thomas Aquinas. As he studied its imagery of death and resurrection, of kings and queens in chemical wedding, of dragons eating their tails and phoenixes rising from ashes, Jung experienced a profound recognition. These weren't descriptions of chemical processes, but maps of psychological transformation, and the Emerald Tablet was their fundamental theorem. Jung had discovered alchemy during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense inner exploration following his break with Freud. In alchemical symbolism, he found precise descriptions of psychological states he was experiencing: the nigredo of depression, the albedo of emerging insight, the rubedo of integrated wholeness. The alchemists, he realized, had been doing depth psychology without knowing it, projecting onto matter the processes of psychic transformation. His interpretation of the tablet revolutionized both psychology and the understanding of hermetic tradition. As above, so below, described the relationship between conscious and unconscious, between ego and self. The one thing from which all arose was the collective unconscious, that deeper layer of psyche shared by all humanity. The circulation between heaven and earth was the constant exchange between conscious and unconscious contents, dreams rising to awareness, conscious attitudes sinking into unconscious complexes. In his tower study, surrounded by stones he had carved with hermetic symbols, Jung practiced what he called active imagination, consciously engaging with unconscious imagery in a way that paralleled alchemical meditation. He painted mandalas that expressed the tablet's unity and diversity. He carved the Bollingen stone, a monument encoding his understanding of the tablet's operations in symbolic form. He even attempted physical alchemy, working with retorts and furnaces to better understand the psychological processes they represented. Jung's Red Book, his record of his own transformation journey, can be read as an extended commentary on the Emerald Tablet. Its illuminated pages show the descent into unconscious depths, the encounter with shadow and anima, the union of opposites in the self, the return to consciousness transformed. The book's creation was itself an alchemical operation, turning the prima materia of raw experience into the gold of integrated wisdom. His influence brought hermetic wisdom into mainstream psychology. Jungian analysts began using alchemical texts as maps for understanding their patients' dreams and development. The process of individuation, becoming who one truly is, was recognized as the psychological equivalent of creating the philosopher's stone. The tablet's operations provided a template for understanding how consciousness develops through the integration of opposites, thinking and feeling, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, spirit and matter, walking the emerald path. You sit in the early morning quiet of your modern meditation room, a space you've carefully prepared according to principles thousands of years old, yet immediately relevant. The walls are painted a soft green, the colour of spring leaves, of new growth, of the tablet itself. On a low table before, you rest your own copy of the Emerald Tablet, perhaps printed from the internet, perhaps handwritten in a journal, the same words that have passed through Egyptian temples, Baghdad libraries, medieval laboratories, and now into your 21st century hands. As you settle into stillness, your breathing naturally slows and deepens. You're not trying to make gold from lead in any literal sense, but you are engaged in transformation. The busy thoughts that normally fill your mind, that constant chatter of plans and worries and reactions, begin to settle like sediment in a flask. This is your calcination, the first heating that begins to separate the subtle from the gross. You're not fighting your thoughts, but observing them, seeing how they arise from nothing, take form, and dissolve again, participating in the same circulation the tablet describes. You bring your attention to your heart center, that point where above and below meet in your own body. Here, mystics say, is where the sun and moon unite, where the father principle of awareness meets the mother principle of feeling. You can sense it as warmth, as expansion, as a subtle brightness that has nothing to do with physical light. This is your philosophical Mercury, the medium through which transformation happens, neither purely physical nor purely mental, but something that participates in both. With each breath, you practice the circulation. The inhale draws energy up from earth through your body toward heaven, gathering the power of things inferior, the strength and stability of matter. The exhale descends from heaven toward earth, bringing down the clarity and consciousness of things superior. This isn't visualization, but participation, actually engaging with forces that are always present but usually unnoticed. You're becoming conscious of processes that normally happen automatically, bringing them into awareness where they can be refined and directed. As your meditation deepens, you might notice how your sense of separate self begins to soften. The boundaries between inside and outside, self and world, become permeable. This isn't losing yourself, but finding a larger self that includes yet transcends your ordinary identity. This is what the tablet means by "thereby all obscurity shall fly from thee." The obscurity isn't outside but inside, the illusion of separation that prevents you from recognizing your participation in the one thing from which all arises. You end your practice by placing your hands on your heart, feeling the actual physical warmth there, grounding the meditation in your body. The tablet insists that the power must be turned to earth, that spiritual insight must be embodied to be complete. As you open your eyes and return to ordinary consciousness, you carry something with you, a quality of presence, a remembered wholeness, a seed of transformation that will continue working throughout your day. Quantum Emerald. In research laboratories around the world, Quantum physicists are discovering phenomena that would have seemed perfectly reasonable to Hermes Trismegistus, particles that exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Entangled photons that remain connected across any distance, changes to one instantly affecting the other, observer effects where consciousness seems to collapse probability waves into actual events. The mechanical universe of Newton has given way to something far stranger, something that echoes ancient hermetic principles in mathematical equations. Consider quantum entanglement through the lens of the tablets as above, so below. When particles become entangled, they form a unity that transcends space, maintaining correspondence regardless of separation. This isn't metaphor but measured fact, confirmed in laboratories from Vienna to Beijing. The particles seem to remember their connection, to maintain what physicists carefully call non-local correlation, but which sounds remarkably like the sympathy and correspondence that Hermetic philosophy always claimed connected all things. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that reality exists in superposition, all possibilities present simultaneously, until the act of observation collapses the wave function into a specific state. This mirrors the tablet's description of how all things arose from one through the meditation of one. Consciousness, the act of observation, transforms potential into actual, possibility into reality. The observer cannot be separated from the observed. They form one system, one thing, producing its adaptations through their interaction. String theory proposes that what we perceive as particles are actually vibrations in higher dimensional strings, different frequencies producing different forms of matter and force. This resembles the Hermetic teaching that all diversity arose from unity through different modes of vibration, that the one thing manifests as many through variations in its essential movement. The tablet's circulation between heaven and earth could describe vibrations moving through dimensions we cannot directly perceive, but whose effects we experience as the fundamental forces of nature. The holographic principle in cosmology suggests that all the information in a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary, that the three-dimensional world might be a projection from a two-dimensional surface. This scientific hypothesis echoes the Hermetic axiom that each part contains the whole, that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm completely. Every fragment of a hologram contains the entire image. Every piece of the universe contains information about all of it. Modern theories of consciousness, especially integrated information theory and orchestrated objective reduction, propose that awareness might be fundamental to reality rather than emerging from complex arrangements of unconscious matter. This returns us to the tablet's beginning, where all things arose through meditation, through an act of cosmic consciousness. Matter and mind aren't separate categories, but different aspects of one thing, exactly as Hermetic philosophy always maintained. Even the search for a theory of everything, the attempt to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity, echoes the tablet's promise of understanding the one thing from which all forces and phenomena arise. Physicists seeking mathematical equations are pursuing the same goal as alchemists who sought the philosopher's stone, a single key that explains all transformation, all force, all existence, digital mysteries. In the glow of computer screens around the world, a new generation discovers the Emerald Tablet through websites, forums, and social media. Passive sight, the same text that was once hidden in monastery libraries and private collections, now spreads instantly across fiber optic cables, reaching millions simultaneously. Digital technology has become the new mercury, the medium through which Hermetic wisdom circulates, ascending to cloud servers and descending to personal devices, gathering participants from every corner of the earth. Online communities form around tablet interpretation, bringing together practitioners who might never meet physically but share deep connection through digital space. A software engineer in Tokyo exchanges insights with a herbalist in Peru, a quantum physicist in Geneva debates with a ceremonial magician in New Orleans. The internet itself becomes an alchemical vessel, where diverse traditions dissolve and recombine, creating new synthesis, unexpected adaptations. The racists say virtual reality environments allow immersive exploration of hermetic symbolism. Users can walk through three-dimensional mandalas, experience synesthetic translations, where the tablet's words become color and sound, participate in ritual spaces that exist nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. The digital realm offers a kind of philosophical mercury, infinitely malleable, capable of taking any form, bridging the physical and ideal in ways that would have amazed medieval alchemists. Artificial intelligence trained on hermetic texts generates new interpretations, finding patterns human readers might miss. Machine learning algorithms discover correlations between alchemical symbolism and molecular chemistry, between ancient star charts and modern astronomy, between meditation techniques described in various traditions. The AI doesn't understand meaning in human terms, but recognizes patterns, connections, correspondences, performing its own version of the tablet's operation, separating subtle from gross through mathematical analysis. Yet the digital realm also presents new challenges: information without initiation, knowledge without wisdom, connection without community. The tablet's secrets, once protected by languages and symbols, now float freely through cyberspace, accessible to anyone yet perhaps understood by fewer than ever. The work of transformation, always requiring patience and dedication, seems at odds with the instant gratification of digital culture. The unchanging formula, through all its translations and transformations, across cultures and centuries, through laboratory and temple, through manuscript and motherboard, the essential message of the Emerald Tablet remains unchanged. 13 lines of text, probably never carved in actual emerald, possibly never existing as a physical object at all, yet more real in their influence than monuments of stone. The formula stays constant. Unity becomes multiplicity through emanation, then returns to unity through integration. Whether expressed as chemical process, spiritual journey, psychological development, or quantum mechanics, the pattern persists. Something descends from potential to actual, from implicit to explicit, from above to below. It develops, complexifies, and evolves through interaction and adaptation. Then it ascends again, carrying with it the experience of manifestation, enriching the source with what has been learned through separation. This isn't merely philosophy, but description of how change happens at every scale. Seeds contain the plant's full potential, express it through growth, then produce new seeds that carry forward both inheritance and variation. Consciousness emerges from unconsciousness in the morning, develops through the day's experiences, returns to unconsciousness in sleep, enriched by what it has encountered. Civilizations arise from simplicity, develop complexity, and dissolve back into the cultural soil from which new civilizations will grow. The tablet's truth doesn't depend on historical accuracy. Whether Hermes Trismegistus was a god, a sage, or a symbol doesn't matter. Whether the tablet was carved in emerald, written on paper, or existed only in oral tradition, doesn't change its validity. The formula works because it describes something fundamental about reality's structure, a pattern that consciousness recognizes because consciousness itself follows this pattern. What remains constant is transformation itself, the eternal circulation that never ceases. The specific forms change, lead becomes gold, ignorance becomes wisdom, separation becomes unity, but the process continues. Each completion becomes a new beginning. Each achievement of the philosopher's stone reveals another level of work to be done. The tablet promises mastery, but delivers endless learning, promises completion, but provides eternal becoming. Libraries of light. In the pre-dawn quiet of the Vatican secret archives, a scholar runs gloved fingers across a manuscript that hasn't been touched in decades. The parchment whispers secrets as pages turn, revealing marginal notes in fading brown ink, where some medieval scribe recorded their understanding of the emerald tablet's operations. Light filters through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that dance like atomic particles, like tiny worlds in their own circulation between ceiling and floor. Across the world, in the hidden repositories of Cairo, Damascus, and Istanbul, similar scenes unfold. Researchers peer at computer screens showing digitized manuscripts, fragments of the tablet in Arabic, Syriac, Persian, languages layered like geological strata, each translation adding its own crystallization of meaning. The search continues for earlier versions, original sources, that mythical first inscription that might never have existed, except in the eternal realm of ideas. Modern seekers make pilgrimages to these libraries as their predecessors journeyed to sacred sites. They come seeking not just information but transformation, believing that somewhere in these accumulated centuries of commentary lies the key they haven't found in published translations. They photograph manuscripts with phones that have more processing power than the computers that sent humans to the moon, creating digital copies that will outlive the paper originals, ensuring the tablet's words survive into futures we cannot imagine. The librarians who tend these collections often speak of the strange effect these texts have on those who study them deeply. Scholars arrive seeking historical facts, but leave talking about personal transformation. Skeptics come to debunk, but find themselves drawn into the mystery. The texts seem to work on their readers, performing their own slow alchemy, transforming curiosity into wonder, wonder into dedication, dedication into a lifetime of seeking. The living tradition. Today, in workshops and retreats, in home laboratories and temple spaces, thousands of people actively work with the Emerald Tablet's principles. They aren't all trying to make physical gold, though some still pursue that ancient dream with modern equipment. Most seek transformation of a different kind, healing trauma through alchemical psychology, creating art that expresses hermetic principles, developing technologies based on correspondence and sympathy, exploring consciousness through meditation techniques encoded in the tablet's operations. Modern alchemists blend ancient wisdom with contemporary knowledge. They use mass spectrometers to analyze their tinctures, combine traditional planetary timing with astronomical software, document their work in blogs and videos that reach global audiences. Some work with plants, creating spagyric medicines that capture what they believe are subtle energies beyond chemical components. Others focus on inner work, treating their own consciousness as the primary laboratory. In Prague, descendants of Rudolf II's alchemists maintain private laboratories in cellars that have seen centuries of the work. In California, tech entrepreneurs fund research into monoatomic gold and ormus elements, believing ancient alchemy might hold keys to new technologies. In India, practitioners explore connections between hermetic principles and Ayurvedic medicine, finding remarkable parallels in how both traditions understand transformation. Contemporary artists encode tablet principles in their work. Musicians compose according to harmonic ratios derived from hermetic correspondence. Painters layer symbols that can be read alchemically by those with eyes to see. Architects design buildings that facilitate transformation through sacred geometry and conscious use of materials. The tablet's influence spreads through culture in ways both obvious and hidden. An underground river that occasionally surfaces but mostly flows unseen. The tradition adapts to each generation's needs and understandings while maintaining its essential core. Where medieval alchemists spoke of sulfur and mercury, modern practitioners might speak of consciousness and energy. Where Renaissance magi worked with planetary spirits, contemporary practitioners might frame the same operations in terms of archetypal psychology or quantum fields. The language changes, but the work remains. Transformation through the union of opposites, the circulation between above and below, the revelation of unity within multiplicity. Even in academic institutions, the tablet receives serious study. Historians of science recognize its influence on the development of chemistry. Philosophers explore its contributions to Western thought. Literary scholars trace its symbolism through centuries of poetry and prose. The tablet has become respectable enough to dissertation about, even as its deeper mysteries remain as veiled as ever. Emerald Reflections. Pause here. In this moment between reading and understanding, between learning and knowing, feel how the tablet's words have worked on you during this journey, how they've circulated through your consciousness like a subtle tincture, dissolving fixed ideas and crystallizing new insights. You've traveled from ancient Egypt to your present moment, gathering the powers of centuries of interpretation, and now you carry all of it within you, a living library of hermetic wisdom. Notice how differently you understand those 13 lines now. As above, so below. No longer seems like mystical abstraction but practical observation about how patterns repeat across scales. The circulation between heaven and earth feels less like metaphor and more like description of actual processes you can observe in your own breath, your own thoughts, your own life's journey of ascent and descent, and ascent again. Consider how the tablet has served as a mirror for every age, reflecting back each generation's preoccupations and possibilities. Egyptian priests saw divine wisdom. Islamic alchemists found practical science. Medieval Christians discovered spiritual allegory. Renaissance magi recognized natural magic. Enlightenment philosophers glimpsed universal laws. Romantics felt living nature. Psychologists mapped the unconscious. Quantum physicists encounter paradox resolved. Each saw truth, because the tablet contains all these truths, not as contradiction but as complementary facets of one thing. The tablet asks nothing of you except consideration, imposes no dogma except transformation, demands no faith except in the possibility of change. It offers itself openly, yet maintains its mystery, reveals everything, while keeping its secret, speaks plainly in language that requires a lifetime to understand. It promises that by this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, but the glory turns out to be not power over others, but participation in the eternal process that creates and dissolves all things. As above, so below, forever. Close your eyes and feel yourself present in this eternal moment where all times converge. You are simultaneously in an Egyptian temple where priests first contemplated divine wisdom, in a Baghdad laboratory where sulfur and mercury dance in heated flasks, in Newton's secret chamber where gravity and grace unite in mathematical formula, in your own present where ancient wisdom meets quantum mystery. Feel the circulation moving through you now, not as idea, but as lived reality. Your breath rises from deep in your belly, drawing up the earth's strength, ascending through your chest where it gathers the emotions' waters, continuing up through your throat where it becomes articulate air, reaching your crown where it touches the fire of consciousness. Then it descends again, carrying awareness down through thought, to feeling, to sensation, to the ground of being, completing one cycle in an endless spiral. You sense how your body is made of star stuff, atoms forged in stellar furnaces, arranged temporarily in this pattern you call yourself. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your DNA, all of it has circulated through countless forms, been stones and seas and other beings, ascending and descending through nature's transformations. You are not separate from this process, but its current expression, the universe knowing itself through your unique perspective. In this moment of recognition, the boundary between reader and text dissolves. You aren't studying the tablet. You are the tablet, a living expression of its principles. Your consciousness is the mercury that makes transformation possible. Your life is the laboratory where the work proceeds. Your relationships are the chemical weddings where opposites unite. Your challenges are the furnace that purifies. Your growth is the stone being perfected. The promise fulfills itself through you. All obscurity flies away because you see clearly that you were never separate from the whole. The glory of the whole world is already yours, because you are the whole world concentrated into this precious point of awareness. The one thing from which all arose is consciousness itself. Your consciousness, not separate from cosmic consciousness, but its perfect expression, in this moment, in this place, in this breath, the eternal emerald. And so we come to the end, that is no ending, the completion that opens to beginning, the final words that return us to the first. The emerald tablet continues its journey, neither diminished by time nor exhausted by interpretation. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, its words will continue their work in you, circulating through your dreams, dissolving what needs releasing, crystallizing what's ready to emerge. The tablet travels now through fiber optic cables and quantum computers, through virtual realities and artificial intelligences, adapting to technologies its ancient authors couldn't have imagined, yet somehow anticipated in their description of endless adaptation. It spreads through meditation apps and online courses, through YouTube videos and Instagram posts, democratized beyond anything the mystery schools could have conceived, yet maintaining its essential mystery despite universal access. Somewhere tonight, a teenager in Mumbai discovers the tablet through a random internet search and feels the shock of recognition, the sense of coming home to something always known but temporarily forgotten. A grandmother in Sao Paulo finds in its words comfort for losses that seemed unbearable, understanding that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed. A scientist in Stockholm sees in its formula the elegant solution to a problem that's consumed years of research. A child in Cairo dreams of green stones that sing the secret names of everything. The tablet requires no belief, establishes no church, demands no worship. It simply continues its quiet work of transformation, seed becoming tree becoming seed, question becoming quest, becoming questioning, lead becoming gold, becoming the understanding that lead and gold were always one thing expressing itself through different arrangements. It teaches without teaching, reveals without revealing, transforms without changing its essential nature. As our journey together draws to its gentle close, feel how the tablet has become part of you, its wisdom encoded in your cells, its operations continuing, whether you consciously attend to them or not. You carry it forward now. Another link in the golden chain of transmission that stretches from the beginning of human wandering to futures we can barely imagine. May these historical reflections have brought you comfort and calm until another night brings another story, another journey through time's vast library, another opportunity to discover that the greatest mysteries are often the simplest truths, hidden in plain sight, waiting patiently for eyes ready to see, hearts ready to receive, consciousness ready to remember what it has always known. May history's gentle embrace guide you to restorative slumber.